what do such events in history tell us about humanity, our weakness, and even probably the response that came from Christians, from the medical world, that we need at this time to be reminded of?
Thank you. I'll piggyback my answer with some of the things that my two brothers have talked about. I think the first thing that we need to notice is that we are weak. Even in your question, you say, how does this weakness of us in the presence of microorganisms, how does that present? And the first thing that then you would recognize is that we are weak. And I think Pastor Murungi also alluded to that. We are weak. We have to first begin from that point, that we are weak. But then what does that weakness lead to? And this, I think, would be the difference between a Christian and a non-Christian. And I think the first thing that a Christian would recognize is that this weakness does not dissolve, or it does not diminish your calling as a Christian. And we see wonderful examples from the Christians, the early Christians. Pastor Eric has just talked about the Bishop of Alexandria, Dionysius, and the Bishop of Carthage, Cyprian, and what they had to write about what was going on. While all the people were being told to run away, go to the hills, the Christians did not do that. The Christians were left to take care of the sick. And actually, that's one of the main reasons why the Christian population jumped from, I think, 1.5% to around 10%. Because people looked back and saw, these Christians have something, and what they are doing is they have all this wonderful hope, and they are not like the government, which is leaving us to ourselves. So the presence of weakness should indicate to us that we have a higher calling, that we are not going to say, I need to preserve myself. We should not be looking to self-preservation, and we should also be doing self-sacrificing. I saw a comment that how comes you would want to die having thousands of masks that you have put to protect your whole family, and your neighbors don't have any, and then you die with all those masks. Rather, you should die helping your neighbor. And I think that is what we're being called to do. And again, I take that from what Martin Luther did when the bubonic plague was hitting Wittenberg in 1527. You find that Martin Luther, when everybody is being told to run away, did not run away. Pastor Eric said that Martin Luther and the wife remained in Wittenberg, and they were helping people. And I think there is a letter he wrote, and he said, it is only me and the deacons, but Christ is with us. I think we need to recognize that. That was very brave of Luther. So our Christian responsibilities do not end because we are so weak, so we are going to look at self-preservation. We are still called to love our neighbors. We are still called to preach the word. So that's the first recognition I would point out. I think the second thing is that weakness, just like again has been pointed out, should always be a reminder to us. Even in a normal situation, if you're weak, if you're walking and you're feeling weak, what do? You support yourself. And we know who is our rock. We're supposed to lean on the tower, the strong tower that we need to lean on. So our weakness should lead us to recognizing that we have one who is able, who has promised that in our weakness he is strong. I like what Paul writes on the issue of weakness, and if we could, for example, look at 2 Corinthians 4:7. It's a verse that I think we are all familiar. 2 Corinthians 4:7, Paul says, but we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. And he continues and says, we are buffeted, we are afflicted on every way, but we are not crushed. And we are all familiar with that. But look at it. He says the treasure is not in vessels of steel. It doesn't say it's in, permanent compositions. It's in jars of clay that can be broken at any given point. But what should that lead us to? To know that the power does not belong to us, that the surpassing power belongs to God. Yeah. So our weakness should also point us or, prod us to know that the person with the strength and the power is God and not us. Because often when we are this strong, we happen to be self-conceited, and that is what also Paul was saying. Again, the other verse would be 2 Corinthians also 12. The verse where he's talking about his thorn, 2 Corinthians 12, from verse 7, that so to keep me from being conceited because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me and keep me from becoming conceited. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for me. It is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And I think there you find the first, very important point, that I think even in our weakness, we should be boasting in the strength of the Lord, because his grace is sufficient and his power is made perfect in our weakness. And when you proceed, you say, therefore I'll boast all the more gladly in my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. So for the sake of Christ, verse 10, for the sake of Christ, then I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong. We need to know that weakness is actually an invitation from God, so that the power of God can be manifested in us. So whether we are going to face COVID, whether we are going to face flu, whether we are going to face Ebola, it doesn't matter. We know that his grace is sufficient and his power is made manifest in our weakness. And perhaps as a final thing, I think we need to know that the ultimate pandemic, if I may put it like this, the ultimate pandemic is sin. And I say that because the definition of pandemic is something that spreads all over the world. I think so far we don't have COVID in Lesotho and Comoros Islands, and I know probably it's still a matter of time. But the point I'm making is that diseases may not get to every country in the world, but we know that sin is in the whole world. Sin is the ultimate pandemic, and how do we respond to sin? We need to look up to the one who conquered sin.
Amen.
Thanks.
Thank you. That was so helpful.